Okay. It's been a little while. Sorry about that. Tanner was almost dead. A little bit. So we couldn't do last week. But we have a fun one this week. This week, I should say, welcome to What Would They Wield, the little show that we do where we discuss the hypothetical question of what would a random character or person in history wield if they had to wield a melee weapon.
Not just history, but like any fictional.
Well, yeah, I meant any character from literature or history. I mean, from any character, real or not. But we argue about whether they should what they should wield. I'm Nate.
This is Tanner,
also known as the Sick. No, I'm kidding. Not anymore. And welcome to it. Today we've got a fun one to discuss. We are going to cover Dracula. So Dracula, originally written by Bram Stoker. I don't know if you've ever read the novel.
I am not a novel person, no. But I know I've seen a decent amount of representation across multiple cultural
multiple forms of media.
Yeah. So I mean, and I guess that's another thing that's going to come into factor and play here.
Oh, it really does.
I mean, the representation of
there's going to be there's so many diverse representations of the vampire that comes from Bram Stoker's novel. Yeah. That's a real big factor this time. So what we try and do, for those of you who don't know, is we have a few questions here that we go through and try and answer. We got about 5 of them. And then we pose our question, 4, and then we pose our question at the end. Bram Stoker was originally Dracula was originally written by Bram Stoker in the mid to late 1800s. I don't remember. I've read the show. Yeah. We're theater people. I've read the play.
You read the book?
I've read the book. I've read the book several times.
Yeah, gotcha.
A handful of times, I should say, not several. It's for those of you who haven't read it, it actually does hold up. Which some of the old monster novels don't. Like Dorian Gray is disappointing, and Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde is overly wordy. But Bram Stoker holds up.
But I mean, like he's one of the base characters that kind of sets the genre, and he is established over time.
What's our first question?
The first question is their origin. Where are they from? So I mean that kind of brings it together.
So
the old. Well, I mean it's hard to not know. Kind of even if you haven't read the novel.
Oh yeah, no.
Talking about Transylvania.
Yeah, and he's based upon an act. So what's interesting is that he's supposed to be an actual person that existed in history. Yeah. By the name of Vlad Dracula, or also known by Vlad the Impaler, which to most of us in the Western world, Vlad the Impaler is known as a villain. To the people of Romania, Romania, Transylvania area, he's actually not.
Well, yeah. Usually, people in history from your origins are not as
Well, I mean, he's not the straight up villain for them that we see him as, because even though he did those heinous things and they admit it, but what's interesting about Vlad himself is that they see him as the hero that kept out the invasion of the Muslim Empire as it was at the time. He secured their borders. He did it very bloodily. But what's interesting about the fact that another interesting thing about the fact that he's supposed to be this real person, they never, Bram Stoker never actually, he does it all through reference. He never actually says Vlad at all. No. He never says Vlad the Impaler. He never says Vlad Dracula. None of it. Which is, I find really cool and really interesting.
Well, and I think one of my favorite stories is supposedly even the concept of Dracula turning into a bat is based off of a battle that was had against him, where basically they disappeared over a hill, and
and they disturbed a crap ton of bats,
Yep.
and they did it on purpose.
Yep. And the army thought they basically disappeared and turned all into bats, and that's where that whole thing came from, which is hilarious.
And it comes from a much older concept. So that's the other big thing that we have to talk about, is that back in the day, the idea of the undead was a very, believe it or not, nuanced thing. They had the whole zombie idea, but Dracula comes from, as some of you probably have heard, the term Nosferatu. And what?
Sorry,
Nosferatu. Either way,
is his own thing.
They both come from the same old story.
Yeah.
And the old story of Nosferatu was, or at least my understanding, the origins of it comes from Romania and Transylvania area, and these people were undead, but they could turn into wolves. They for them, the origin of the werewolf and the vampire are the same thing, and it's from this old story. And then we've more defined it as it's come out as these very separate things. But an undead, a Nosferatu could manifest in a multitude of ways, and the vampire was only one of them, which is kind of interesting.
Well, but then media brings them back together. You know, there are plenty of movie franchises that have put
like the Underworld,
werewolves and vampires back together. Underworld, Van Helsing with Hugh Jackman actually connected the two as being part of the same kind of.
Have you seen Underworld? I was about to say the origins of that they come from the same bloodline. Yeah.
So cool. So the second question we answer is, what is their personality? Which this can change depending on what you which media you go off of, because it's anywhere from we've seen the goofy, obviously more cartoonish stuff of Dracula, but then there's the one that kind of just wants to be on his own, who isn't really bothered until you bother him, and then he becomes the evil, the tyrant.
And then there's the one that's Sparkle.
Yeah.
But I could not make that.
Yeah,
reference.
But then there's then there's the one that's just always been and always will be pure evil and has no good intent. There's no redemption.
So here's the interesting thing as far as the book is concerned. One, he doesn't look like what we all think of as a vampire. Mm-hmm. He actually has a big bushy white mustache, and which is the part that I find the funniest. He has fangs, but like a huge professional cowboy mustache. Yeah, that's white. And his personality in that is he's a gentleman, or at least he tries to be, but he's almost neurotic. He as soon as things start to go wrong, he becomes obsessive, and it's interesting because his main purpose is not to be alone. It's also not to necessarily hurt people in that sense. It is, but he's much more mastermind. He is doing everything he can to learn about England, and so that he can blend in when he moves to England. He's trying to invest all of his money in England, and the whole premise of this book is to not let this demon infest a super populated area, and to get him back to Transylvania so he can murder peasants. But he was actually trying to become part of society. Weirdly enough, he's not this recluse that the mainstream likes to portray almost all of their vampires as this recluse type of person hidden in the shadows. No, he was sitting there going, am I saying this right? I can't wait to get to London.
Yeah, yeah, he's much more sociable than you would think. But I mean, that's always been, I think, counterpart, always been part of vampire cultures. They're always very suave. They're always very finesse. They're always, they're very noble-like. I mean, Count.
Oh yeah, no.
Dracula.
I'm just talking about
in the title.
What's interesting is that the recluse. To me, they're always suave, but always recluse.
Yeah, people come to them.
Right. The recluse part. Part isn't a thing in the original book. He's like, so I'm going to put all my money in London, and you're going to help me talk as though I'm from London, and London will be my new home. And he's trying to portray this thing of, oh, such a noble city where, and really it's such a noble city where no one's going to notice people dying.
Yeah. So yeah, so I guess I mean that kind of there's more of their story a little bit, but personality wise, I guess it's kind of, for me, it can be all over the place. I've always seen him as the gentleman, the finessed nobleman, if you will, very on airs kind of person, but also very vengeful when
very
necessary.
Neurotic and obsessive and controlling. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like Phantom of the Opera is almost a vampire wannabe.
I can see that.
You know what I mean?
Fair. I think that's fair analogy. What do they represent?
They represent, well, in Bram Stoker's argument, they're representing that which is, I don't want to say, it's not, against nature isn't enough. It's something that's existence is an insult and affront to God and order. Like the fact that he exists is a plague upon the earth, no matter what he does. Like it represents the otherworldly. On best word, he embodies the term unearthly.
That's fair. So when you're saying basically, like in the definition of monster, if you will, I, as far as a representation, I always looked at Dracula as far as like society is concerned, the upper class.
Oh, feeding upon the lower class
of evil.
Yeah, no, yeah.
Like instead of monsters always being these kind of mindless or like lower life forms that are feeding on the prey, the prey they can pick off. It's another person that can blend, like still has bad intent, but can disguise himself as this.
Well, and not just going off of that, like you're talking about the human aspect of it, the human monster, but you mentioned the noble monster, the monster amongst nobility. I think that's an important distinction because there are lots of things that turn people into monsters, but most of them are peasants, like werewolves and zombies and those are the only ones coming to mind. But there are more werewolves and zombies. But the unique thing about Dracula, as you point out, he is nobility. In that sense, it's a representation of absolute power becoming evil.
But it's also like, not just the monster. The monster in the night isn't always apparent.
Yeah,
that kind of.
He's also
situation.
almost the forbidden fruit type of thing,
mm-hmm.
or it's too good because Dracula and vampires in general tend to be very nice. They're it's the forbidden fruit, the don't trust the too kind stranger, or the child. What was the creepy guy in Willy Wonka? The child napper or something.
What?
Maybe I'm thinking of Candyland. Either way,
yeah, you're I don't know, but child.
Either way, it hurt my childhood. It's out there. But no, that concept of beware the stranger.
The next question is, what are their physical capabilities? And this is where,
oh my gosh,
things can come into play.
Bram Stoker had a lot of fun with this.
Yeah. So, good Lord. I mean, okay, so I think we can both agree that the turning into a bat thing has always been so transformation. So I'll give him that because I don't think it hasn't always just been a bat.
It's not. Like what's interesting is when you get into Bram Stoker, he had a lot of fun with giving the creature abilities.
Mm-hmm.
Like there are so many you don't see. One, he not only turned into vampire. He not only turned into a bat, he also turned into a giant wolf. Oh. He could also turn into dust and to mist and go through keyholes. Like, yeah. And that's just the transformation aspect.
Yeah.
He did have super strength,
mm-hmm.
and they describe him as having a grip like iron. He also was able to command wolves. He was able to control and appear on the other side of translucent blue fire.
Yeah.
He was able to create not only other vampires, but also what became known as Renfields, because the guy who, I believe it's the guy who the story is written. It's written from the viewpoint of a different person, not from Dracula, but it's written from a third party, and I believe his name is Renfield.
Yeah.
Becoming what's now known as a Renfield, which is becoming the enslaved mind of a vampire, which is different than being turned into a vampire.
A thrall.
A thrall,
essentially,
yes,
if you will. Yeah, like because that's being explored. There's actually a movie coming out with.
They're called.
It's called Renfield.
Is it called Renfield? Yeah.
But the idea that he could share powers with people, and that's what enticed them to be loyal of their own accord, if you will, to him in a sense of
what they think is their own accord.
Well, some of them it is completely.
Oh yeah, but
the concept of a lot of the Renfield is that like he does it for his own safety, his own for a sense of something that keeps him sustained or whatever.
The other thing that he can do is he can climb walls like Spider-Man.
Yeah.
There's a whole weird moment in the book where Renfield sticks his head out the window and just sees him crawling head down like a spider down a tower, and it's just like, oh.
Yeah. I mean, they show it a little bit in the movie. I know it wasn't a fan favorite of a lot of people, but The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
Oh yeah.
Where she's going after the guys shooting with them from in the car and stuff, and she crawls along the.
I suppose
very kind of
the last thing.
Yeah,
I suppose the last thing I'll bring up that's unique in the book in a sense is, what was it? He can turn to mist. He can do. It's insinuated that he has super speed. It's never said. We never see him do it, but he appears places that far sooner than he should.
Yeah.
If you so what you have to do in the book is you have to realize he is pretending that there are multiple, that he has servants.
But it's just him.
But it's just him, and Renfield never sees any servants, but somehow all the stuff gets done.
Yeah.
Including one time where he sees Dracula in the woods and hasn't met him yet. He's on his way there, and he's able to be the guy in the woods running with wolves and also be his coach at the same time. The coach just comes back and is just there, costume change and everything. Yeah, and it makes you sit there go, what? Which is why he didn't question this stuff to begin with. He's like, oh, it's one of the big reveals in the book is, oh my gosh, there's nobody else here. It's all the same person.
And I mean, but that's also been a staple through pop culture and everything.
Oh yeah,
is they always have super speed, and I think that's what will make our final question. Is what would they?
He doesn't sparkle.
Yeah. But like I think it brings up an interesting, because a lot of the times when you see them depicted in pop culture, they don't need anything.
They don't.
A lot of times they just use, their fingernails.
It seems almost unfair to give him one.
They just,
but that's what we're here to argue
about. They just like pierce through people, and a lot of them end up killing each other. I think it's what's the Vampire's Apprentice maybe.
You mean the movie that's coming out?
No, it was a book.
I don't know this.
It was their children's books. It was like Sorcerer's Apprentice, blah blah blah.
Right.
But in that one, they fight with their fingernails, and they like. He's training as apprentice. He's like, this is how we fight. Like this is. And he cuts a tree with just his fingernails slicing and stuff like that. But I mean, like the concept.
Bring that to a nail salon.
Yeah, but I mean, like the concept of that has also been,
Oh yeah, I mean
constantly interpreted.
Most of the time, although there is that anime about Dracula that came out recently, and he uses a sword in that.
Castlevania.
Yeah, Castlevania.
Yeah, Castlevania, which is based off the video game.
I don't.
Yeah, it's an old video game. But they give him a lot of powers in that too. Like he has the power to he's a sorcerer as well.
Yeah,
essentially, summon demons and magic and stuff like that. And they kind of humanize him a little bit in that one. they in the show that they did.
Yeah, they do.
They gave him a wife, and his wife gets murdered, and then he goes on a rampage, and then becomes kind of like the hateful, you know, sinful vampire lord. But with that being said, so
assuming he would fight,
giving them a weapon overpowers them.
We're gonna assume. Let's say okay. To make this reasonable, let's say we're putting them. They're not fighting humans. They're fighting something that their nails would be like our nails too. Let's say they don't have the nails and whatnot, and let's say they're fighting. We're not going to say werewolves because that's been done, but let's say they're fighting other vampires, and that they need a weapon for whatever reason.
Fair enough.
All right. They're fighting Goku. No. That being said, take the floor.
So, I had that with this whole thing in mind. I didn't put it as much as what would they need, as much as just what would I give them to, you know, give them more power or more
what would make
intimidation or anything. Of course, my original thought was a rapier because the count, the noble person, the finesse of the weapon. But I was like, that seems a little overdone. And I was like, what else would I give him? And so in the idea of this just already daunting manifestation of evil, it wasn't as much as like, if I use this, it's not because I need to, but because I want to, and I want to cause the most carnage and just the complete depletion of morale when someone sees him. So I actually gave him a halberd.
Okay, all right, I can see that.
I gave him a halberd because I thought it's an intimidating looking weapon. If he uses it, he's using it only to massacre, and he wants people to see the different ways that he can kill you, that he's choosing to kill you, that he doesn't necessarily need to, but it's just for more carnage and more, more of a power statement than his actual need to do it. And it gives him multiple ways to accomplish that.
You got the axe, the stabby. You had the stabby and the bodkin on the back too.
Yeah, so I gave him that because I was like, oh, it kind of gives you that, like, this already massively intimidating person carrying this, and I imagine it would be much bigger than a usual one because their strength is an accountant for that. They already have super strength, so they can carry something that's a little more unwieldy to the normal person. But yeah, so I gave him that because I just thought it would be a good representation of the already overwhelming sight and overwhelming power of that is Dracula's embodiment.
So of course, like in good nerd fashion, I couldn't just pick one.
Of course.
Yeah. So, all right. So first, I went with not in a fight, just like if he was gonna, let's say he got bored and he wanted new ways to kill people, a garrote made of razor wire.
Interesting.
Like if he can just appear and just be behind you, he'll have no issue getting that around your neck or any various limb, and just very visceral, very fast, just like you're. And it's not that he's gonna strangle something. No, he's gonna like grab and twist and just that gruesome. And the thing to me that works for Dracula for that is that not only is it gruesome, but it's kind of personal because he's real close to you. Just like the idea, similar to that idea of him biting. How could he? It's that intimate. It has that type of intimacy to it.
Yeah. Okay.
The other, if he had to go to war, I think it was the 1500s. If there are any history nerds, you can let me know. There was this thing that the peasants used to make called a war scythe. And what they would do is they would take, and that's what I gave him, because it was so efficient that they actually became banned in most places in Europe. And what they would do is they would take a scythe, right? So stick, scythe, and like a Grim Reaper. And then they take the scythe and they turn it so that the blade was facing straight up. So it was this long stick with this curving blade that came off this way. And yeah, now that you have that in your head, yeah, that's seemed like a very Dracula. Let's thresh the world type of thing.
Yeah, like a very kind of more speared version of a Grim Reaper scythe.
Yeah, yeah, it's like it's taking the scythe and turning it 90, taking the blade and turning it 90 degrees, and that is a war scythe. And when peasants made them, they were so efficient that the nobility was like, "No, stop it, because your rebellions are working." And I could see him seeing that and going, "Oh, that just looks like fun." Yeah, you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
So that's I mean I understand the halberd, but it doesn't. There isn't enough ripping for me in that sense. I mean that I have to cringe when I see it. But
I mean, I imagine that he, no matter what, he would only have to one shot whatever.
No, I mean
whoever he's fighting.
We could give him a beer stein and we could all be he'd find a way. But that's what we think. This is a difficult one because really you give him anything and he could use it.
Yeah, really you give him nothing, he doesn't need it. But, yeah. I mean, we could say that about some of the other characters that we do, but
that's true. But still, when they're too powerful, it makes it even harder, which is kind of cool.
Yeah,
because then you have to argue based upon who they are and what fits them, rather than. All right, that's what we got. We hope you enjoyed.
Yeah, let us know what you think. Let us know if you have other ideas. We'd love to hear them. So.
Yeah, and please share with your friends and say something in the comments. Insults are welcome. Whatever. We'll see you later. Bye.